coming up on the 70% podcast.
Open their eyes a little bit and maybe just not be so pissed off and take it so personally. I'm not sure if that could ever happen, but if that doesn't happen and we can't get this together, then we're all done. I mean, in my opinion.
Then we're doing this for naught.
Yeah.
Because that's the reason why we're doing this show.
Like I said, I'd like to hang out with you, Mike, but...
I was also really taken aback by this idea that I think it's very elitist of us to assume that if the Black community were given reparations, we wouldn't know how to use it appropriately. Where is that narrative coming from?
No, that came from me, and it wasn't the fact that it wasn't the fact.
Yeah, I'm getting out of this conversation. That was not me, Tracy. That was not me.
The 70% podcast with your host, Amy Alexander and Mike Sewell.
Okay, so getting right into it here, we have a guest speaker tonight, Tracey Robertson. Tracey is actually, from 2014 to 2020, Tracey was an award-winning co-founder and executive director of Fit Oshkosh, Inc., and that was a grassroots nonprofit social justice organization located in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Its mission was to promote social transformation through color-brave conversations, education, advocacy, and research to achieve race equity and justice within the community. And her bio just goes on, and she's won a lot of awards and things of that nature. If I go into this, that's going to be the whole show.
Right.
So just understand
how about
that.
we let her tell us about her?
Right. We'll do that as well. But one of the things that you and I have discovered is that we know we have our feelings and our thoughts about critical race theory and reparations and things of that nature, and we have these discussions. So we thought it would be best to bring someone in who has a little bit more knowledge about that, and that's where Tracey comes in.
Or a little more, I wouldn't say, she just seems to have, her nonprofit works with diversity training and everything else. Right. So she definitely has her finger on the pulse as far as that's concerned. And we'd love to hear, just bring you into the conversation, Tracey. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're up to now as far as, current times and how things are, because I think we're all on the same page. We want to see change.
Yeah.
And
so what I'm up to now is I consider myself a recovering nonprofit executive. I'm no longer in the nonprofit industry, but I'm doing the same work. The work that you're doing is talking to folks about race and racism and how it shows up in our world. And I've started a consulting firm called Quad Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consultants. And we are just doing some training, anti-racism education training, more advocacy work around these topics. So I don't consider myself an expert either. I'm just a person that's really invested in this work. I'm not an academic. I'm just a person invested in this work and love to have dialogue about it. Having dialogue about it has been a great way for me to invite people into the discussion. That's really what my work is inviting people into the discussion and not making people feel bad about what they know about these experiences. I just love to talk about it. I think it's important.
What they know or don't know. And that's where we're at. Yep.
And hopefully after each discussion, I mean, when I meet people or talk to somebody, if I learn something as I'm walking away from them, I feel like, you know what? Right. Yeah, we're going to be friends.
I like it.
So what do you think is your biggest hurdle right now for getting the word across or your program together, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think just, everything, including race and all of the subcategories of that, it's really all politicized and divisive now. And so that makes it really difficult to bring people to the table and have meaningful, positive dialogue. I mean, people are very, very entrenched in their sides, whatever those sides are. And so it's just been really difficult to get people together and have dialogue and be able to walk away peacefully and say, I have a different understanding, or I have a different perspective, or I have more to think about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not about the work of changing people's minds. I think that's too hard.
Mm-hmm.
I learned very early in my nonprofit work that that's virtually impossible. So what I really try to do is just invite people into discussion, give them more to consider.
Right.
Kind of allow them to absorb the information, and they can do with it as they please.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Mike and I have been I don't know if you caught the last couple of shows, but we've been talking pretty heavily about a few topics that we just kind of want your, if you want to join us in the conversation and let us know what your thoughts are, that would be great. One of the things that that seems to be a hot button right now is critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
And how critical, there's so much. I mean, it's to the federal level where there are, yes. Do you feel like critical race theory is common sense, or should be common sense to everybody if the media was not in the middle of it, hammering it away? Or do you think that there are some things that we can adjust from either side to compromise?
Yeah, I guess my question is, how are you defining, like, what do you think critical race theory is? Do you have any ideas, either of you, about that?
Yeah, so we both have a definition of critical race theory. And so does Nate. Nate actually went to University of Iowa, and he experienced that. And from the more the more I learn about it, the more I can see both sides of it. But to me, critical race theory is where you're being critical of race, of course, and then trying to distinguish between the two instead of harmonizing.
And my thoughts on that is that critical race theory is teaching kids in college how race has affected people of color, and financially, and through the laws and stuff like that. So it's teaching us how these things have affected
through systemic racism.
People
I
of
get
color.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's my definition. It's short and sweet, but
right. And we keep going back and forth because, of course, with this distension of it's mostly white people that don't like it, or whatever the case is, why there's so much of a division. It feels there are some cases where I don't know if it's being exaggerated by the reporting, or if it's really that way. But now we're teaching it to 6-year-olds and dividing them in the classroom to make sure that they're aware of their different races. And I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't see that making us any progress.
So, Amy, you don't think that kids in 6th grade, particularly kids of color, don't know about race?
No, I think they do know about race. I just don't. The impression that I'm getting is that you're telling the people of color, or the kids, that they are going to always be looked at negatively, and the white kids that they're always going to be the reason. And I feel like that's a very impressionable age to start into that emotional, whatever you want to call it, dynamic.
So let's start here. What is your definition of critical race theory? What are we missing?
Well, my definition of critical race theory aligns very closely to yours, Mike, except I would make one adjustment. You said that it's how people were treated, something to that effect.
Correct.
And I would venture to say it's how people are still being treated. And I think, Amy, to your point, that, if a teacher, if an educator is doing that to six-year-olds, that's not critical race theory. That's racism, right?
Yeah, there seems to be a line, or a fine line there, I should say.
Absolutely. Critical race theory is an actual theory. It's actual theory that people in the university setting have studied. And it really is designed to show, or to, I guess, not even to show, to recognize and acknowledge that the United States, our country, was built on systemic racism. People have been advantaged by systemic racism. And we still have quite a bit of systemic racism within operating in our policies and our practices, right? And so that's what critical race theory is. It really is just teaching real history, in my opinion, and talking about the impacts of racism and racialized incidents in our country. I think that's incredibly important. I think we've done ourselves a disservice by not telling the truth about our history, or trying to take out pieces of our history to make certain people in our community look like heroes and certain people in our community look like zeros.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think maybe it's the approach, or I'm not sure. And like we've said on the show, we're more on the center side. We have 70% of us that are probably in the middle and would agree to this. Well, and I believe, and I'm not talking, I guess I can't talk for everybody, but I kind of see the attitude over here, and I think there's misunderstanding. But I think part of that problem is the pushback is because nobody wants us to get along.
Absolutely.
And now what do we do?
I think it's a lot of diversion tactics, right? It's like, let's make people fight amongst themselves while we slip this legislation under the door, right?
Right.
So absolutely, I think there's a lot of distraction tactics. I also think that our former president made it really cool to be racist. And so
I don't agree with that, but okay. Just to let you know, I'm not on that same page.
I think people have been very emboldened by his unapologetic approach to saying to being racist, verbally racist. So I think people have he's made that okay again.
Okay.
And it's okay that you don't disagree.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what people do. They have differing opinions. That's why it's called a freaking opinion. Mike and I have talked about this at length, and I've watched podcasts and videos and stuff from both sides of it, and I've never been in the middle. Like I wasn't taught that way. So, and I went to school for accounting. Nobody's teaching me accounting through the eyes of the lens of an
African American person, or
right. Actually, we had a lot of Indian people and Asian people.
What are you saying?
I'm just saying that in
the classroom,
in the classrooms and stuff. So they didn't care. Anyway, that's beyond the point. So I wonder if there's a better way to define critical race theory instead of as it is today, and what we need to do today to solve today's problems, as opposed to continuing to, the right is going back to 1979 or whatever, and it's like it's based on Marxist policies. So that means it's not a good idea, and we can't make adjustments so that it isn't so Marxist or whatever. And
the American Civil Liberties Union has a podcast out right now with Miss Crenshaw. I forget her first name. I apologize for that. But she is one of the people who was responsible for developing critical race theory. And I think I'm always encouraging people to do their own homework. And I think it would be important for your audience and for anybody who really is interested in critical race theory to listen to what she has to share. I think it was powerful and important, and I think it cleared up a lot of the misinformation about critical race theory.
Her name is Kimberly.
Kimberly, yeah. And producer Nate. Sorry, I'm off camera, so if I hop in there, Tracy, big fan, and you're going to hear this voice from afar. So yeah, Kimberly Crenshaw.
And see, here's what I think is happening. I think the results that we're getting from white America right now about critical race theory is exactly what they want to get. They want to stir that fire.
Who does? White America? Or
no, the people that are trying to shut down or say that critical race theory is a bad thing to teach. Okay. I think they're doing that on purpose in order to continue the fighting. Okay. Because race is going to be a hot topic, or it's going to be a hot button.
Well, it's the top four.
Well,
race, gender, political affiliation, and now vax status.
Right. So, I think they're getting the response from the people right now that they're looking for. So you and I are sitting here talking about this. I'm saying, Amy, I don't think critical race theory is teaching that. I think it's just teaching the history of America and how it has affected, people of color. And you're saying, well, no, I think it's teaching that white people are bad, to
I think
to
part
kids.
of the teaching is white. I don't think that's the ultimate goal for that, but there have been enough people that have said, oh yeah, now we're separating people into race categories so that they can look at each other or whatever. And I get that we need to teach the history, but do we have to teach the history in the mode of you are now bad because of your ancestors, or we can say your ancestors sucked. Now, can't we just all work together to get past this systemic part of, and I totally, CRT was started with, it was all started for legal reasons, on a legal basis, to get rid of the laws that are creating this systemic racism.
Right.
But
or to take a look at it.
I think if we acknowledge that our founding fathers were pretty bad folks, then I mean, there are people in the history of America who look like probably people in my own family tree who were probably not great people. That doesn't mean I'm a bad person, right? And so the fact that my family shares a history with me that may not be flattering doesn't mean that I own that. So I guess I'm. That's
how we feel, and that's how white people feel. Like how did we, especially those of us? I mean, there are racist asshats out there. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't white supremacy out there or people that aren't racist. I mean, without getting into any details of who, whatever, I'm not saying it's not out there, but it's whether or not we're teaching the evils of the past to influence the attitudes of the present.
Well, sure,
that concerns me.
I'm really struggling with this idea that we're talking about racism as if it used to be a thing. It's still very much a thing.
Right. No, but I get that. And but we don't have slaves anymore. The people that did that, and our founding fathers, as evil as anybody thinks they are, they were looking out for the population. And most of like in the 1800s, the battle with the North and South and having to convince the South that they need to get rid of slavery and all that stuff. I mean, we're decent people in this country that actually helped fight for the Black community to make sure that they got some of the laws. Not all of them are erased yet.
So, enslaved people were released without a plan, right? They were just let go. None of the mental health issues that clearly would have come out of and being an enslaved person were addressed. They walked right out of enslavement into Jim Crow, right? As early as late as the 1940s, we had the Federal Housing Authority redlining and making it impossible for people of color to get housing. As late as the Clinton administration, the war on drugs incarcerated more Black men than many policies in recent times. So we're talking about, and continues to, right? We have, many African-American men in prison serving pretty long terms for 5 ounces of marijuana, which we've now legalized. And then we have little white girls like the young lady who just got out of prison after 7 years for the Slender Man murders, right? So she got less time than most Black men got for 5 ounces of weed. So I think
I think that is really messed up, and I don't think, but it doesn't have anything to do with how racist I am or how, you know.
No, I think what Tracey is saying is that by teaching critical race theory, it shines a light on those issues. And by shining a light on those issues, which is what I've been, saying the last couple of weeks here, we're able to now say, okay, let's agree that these things are an issue, that these things are a problem, and now let's agree on how to fix those problems. I think the response that by saying, white people are being demonized because of this, I think that's the response that was hoped for and they got, and that's why we're sitting here arguing about this. Because anybody, in my opinion, anybody with a right thinking person is going to think, okay, yeah, racism was wrong, and oh crap, look at all the stuff that happened from racism. Oh, look at these laws that shouldn't be here. Look at the disparity and stuff like that. I mean, just the redlining in itself. I mean, we talked about this last week about how the generational wealth was built through owning property and so forth, whereas Black people weren't able to take advantage of that because of the redlining and so forth. So those are the things that set people of color back in the United States, several hundred years financially from white people. So if we can agree that that was an issue,
not all white people and not all Black people, though.
But no one said all.
We're talking per capita, though, also.
Okay, yeah, we're back to the per capita.
The impacts. And what happens is knowing that, recognizing that when Black veterans came back from Vietnam, they could not buy houses, right? Recognizing that then creates a different level of empathy for people like you, right? And therefore, when these laws and legislations come up, you're going to have a different amount of empathy, and you might vote the wrong way. You might vote for the wrong policies and practices, right? So keeping this information hidden, pretending like the foundational part of our country that's built on racism happened in the 600 years ago, right? Creates that distance that you're talking about. Like, it wasn't me, it wasn't you, but because of the things that have happened in the past, the legislation and the policies that have been set in place are still negatively impacting and causing disparity amongst.
So why do we keep voting for them?
That's I think part of it is that we don't have enough information. I think part of it is that we don't vote. There is a young lady right now who's trying to get civics back into the classroom. I think that's important. We don't even teach civics anymore.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh, okay. That's sad, but okay.
So our kids don't know how to vote. They don't even know how that whole system works. And so they vote with their heart. They vote with what their parents say. We become a one issue voting people, right? There's one issue. I agree with Donald Trump on this issue, so I'm going to vote. What about the other issues, right? And so I think that's one of the big challenges that we have, is that we don't understand the vote. A lot of people didn't know that being on the Supreme Court, you're on the Supreme Court until you die. And there are people who don't know that, right? Because we don't teach civics in school anymore.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So yeah, I get that. So then when we're talking about past to present, what is the end goal? Like, critical race theory is going to do what?
I think if in fact it is taught in schools, it will create more empathy for everyone. It will bridge the gap of distance that we're all feeling, right? Because now that you understand that even though my father fought in the war, my grandfather fought in the war, he couldn't buy a house. You'd be like, wow, my dad was a vet too, and he bought a house. When he got a VA loan, was able to buy a house. That then brings us closer together. There was a woman when I first started doing Fit Oshkosh. Can I tell you all a quick story?
Yeah,
for sure.
When I first started Fit Oshkosh, there was a woman who was very upset with me because we talked about, I'd mentioned white privilege, and she was upset. I don't have any privilege. What are you talking about? My parents pulled themselves up from the bootstraps. And so she and I got together, and I explained to her that we have 3 adult children, 2 boys and a girl. And our dinner table looked exactly like her dinner table, right? We would come in after school, we'd have dinner, we'd talk about school. How was that test? Where did that note come from? The same things that any family talks about at the dinner table, right? But inevitably, my husband would have to talk to my kids, but specifically my boys, about what they would need to do if they were stopped by the police. This was at 4 and 5 years old, because we wanted them to live to tell the story, right? So you got to put your hands right here. You got to make sure you don't make any fast moves. That was part of our everyday dinner time conversation. And I looked at this woman and I said, if you've never had to have that conversation with your kids, that's privilege. And she was like, wow.
Isn't that how everybody? Yeah, but isn't that how you're supposed to react when you get pulled over by the police? Or you're saying that the rate of getting pulled over, whatever the situation may be, is higher per capita or by a percentage than?
It's higher, yes.
Okay.
We knew that our kids would get pulled over without a doubt. It was a question of when, right? That was, I don't think most, I would like to think, I doubt very seriously that most white families are sitting at their tables right now telling their white kids what to do if they get pulled over by the police. Because for us, it was a question of life and death. Even if that's the case, for them, it's not a question of life and death. For us, it was, right? So what that did is that allowed that mother to empathize with me. Right. And she had a different perspective. She was like, now I understand it. Now I can empathize. I've never had to have that conversation with my kids. She was crying, right? Because she then was able to understand part of my plight as a foundational Black American in this country. And that changed her perspective. It didn't change her perspective about everything, of course.
Right.
But it allowed her to meet me. She had empathy. She could understand some of the challenges that I have and I experience as a foundational Black American.
And thus, teaching critical race theory in school should ultimately bridge that same gap, where people are starting to have empathy and understanding.
Call it critical race theory? I think that's where some people, not everybody, some people are just racist assholes, but I think some people are getting stumped or whatever the term because of the critical race theory part. If it's a theory, why are we teaching it as facts to our kids? If it's critical, what part of it is you make it sound critical, just like the word judgment. To me, the word judgment could be good judgment, but it always brings a negative connotation.
That's the same argument that they use with Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee. He took the knee. They got upset about the flag. They didn't think about why he was taking the knee. See, critical race theory is just a word. Critical, or just words put together. Critical race theory. Okay, instead of worrying about that word, let's worry about what's underneath there.
Right.
What's the content?
Well, why do we have to call it critical race theory? Why can't we call it like harmonic race theory?
Would that make a difference?
I don't know. Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to do, though, is put people together, right?
Well,
I have 2 things to say about that.
Okay,
the first of which is we ask kids, particularly kids in college, to think critically about lots of things. Right? We ask them to do critical analysis about lots of things. Why would we not ask them to think critically about race? Because people feel triggered by it. So what? Here's the other thing. It is critical to me. I feel a sense of urgency in this date and time. I have 2 grandsons who are growing up as foundational Black Americans in the United States. To me, it is critical. I feel a sense of urgency because the kids that are growing up alongside them, if they don't know this history, if they don't begin to get this empathy and understanding, then their lives are not going to look much better than my life, right? So as a foundational Black American, this feels urgent to me.
Right.
I want them
to live.
That. I want them to be safe. I want them to be as successful as they choose to be. And if there are barriers like people's feelings that are preventing them from getting the information that they need to help to create laws and legislation that are going to help my grandsons to be more successful, I have a problem with that. It is critical. It's urgent.
If we change the word, we're still not getting to the root of it. We're still not diving deep enough. So instead of if everyone has a clear understanding that critical race theory is teaching about the history of America, and how it has affected people of color, is that enough explanation to say, okay, then we don't have to change it? Let's dive into that. Let's look at that and say, okay, how do we fix this? You know, and like I said earlier, I think all of this is, you know, and this is just my opinion, but, you know, a ploy to continue to divide, you know, and that's really why we're doing the show. That's why we got Tracey on, so that we could sit and have these courageous conversations like we've been having for the last couple of weeks.
I mean, we're not
so
trying
that we can
to
understand.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that you're not going to walk out until you get me to see it your way or whatever, because we've already discussed that will never happen in some respects.
Right.
Like, I'm never going to be a black male, and you're never going to be a white woman.
We're not even going to go there.
Science is tricky. We'll get into transgenderism in a different show.
No, we're going to leave that conversation
Okay.
Well, at least in here.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right now. Right today.
Okay. So yeah, and I get that, and I think, to me, I've always been like, I want to save the planet, Tracy.
Except for all those trees you cut down.
I knew you were going to bring that up. Not Dead Pine Tree Planet, just the rest of the planet.
Oh, okay.
And I really feel like there's some disconnect out there that our compromise is just not coming together. And I feel like it's, you know, when you're talking about race, it's black and white to most people, but it's not. It's such a gray area, and nobody's willing to come to a compromise. It's just like, okay, this is the way it's got to be done, and this is that way it's got to be done. I mentioned to Mike a couple of weeks ago that I thought, you know, since the 40s, we've actually made some pretty good progress away from the Jim Crow laws. Martin Luther King opened a lot of people's eyes and stuff, and he didn't think that we really made any progress at all. And I guess I don't get that. I mean,
I didn't say we didn't make any progress at all. I said that there's still a gap financially between people of color and white people in the United States. You know,
right.
So we have made ground. I mean,
right. The levels of poverty in the black community are way less than they used to be, and they held steady forever and ever for white people. About 10% of us must just be.
What are your thoughts on that, Tracy?
Well, I don't think because I can now drink out of the same water fountain as you can, that we've gotten very far from Jim Crow. What all we've done is we've begun to do things below the surface, right? I don't think that, again, we talked about redlining. The way people build wealth is through real estate, right? And so because of redlining, we haven't amassed the amount of real estate. We don't have generational wealth, right?
Right.
A great book for I would encourage anybody listening to this podcast to listen to is Waking Up White by Debbie Irving, DebbieIrving. It's an incredible book that was written from the perspective of a pretty wealthy white woman who recognized that her family's ability to buy a home and buy real estate through a VA loan that her dad got, the impact of that and how it positioned her family for wealth that, my family would never see, right? It's a powerful resource. I think everybody should read it. But I think there's a lot of distance. I think there's a lot of distance between where white people are and foundational Black Americans are. I think we're not as close as people would like for us to think. And I think it's a big stretch to say because I can drink out of the same water fountain as everybody else that we've made big strides, because we haven't.
So affirmative action and voting laws and all that other stuff, or you're just saying not necessarily in comparison to where you started, but in comparison to where white people are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So voting laws, we're constantly creating legislation that makes it difficult for Black and brown folks to vote successfully. One way we've done that is by putting Black men in prison. You can't vote if you're in prison. You can't vote when you get out of prison. So part of the strategy for incarcerating so many Black men at such a high rate is part of the voting gerrymandering that we're doing right now. So we can't vote at the same rates that you can. And every day, right now, currently, there's legislation that's making it more and more difficult for people of color to vote.
How so, Tracy? Because like I told Amy, what was it, last week? I think we talked. I don't see, I don't see that side of it, and maybe it's because of, I've been blessed or I've been in my own little world. But so how is that? Because there's a couple of things I wanted to address real quick, and we'll get to that. First off, I don't think that white people should feel guilty for everything that has happened. And what we should do is, like you said earlier, have empathy and say, okay, now how do we move forward? Okay, so if the media and all of that is making people feel guilty, I don't think it's black people in general that is saying, hey, you need to feel guilty because of what your ancestors did. So there's that, and then you spoke about privilege. I think that when it comes to privilege, everybody has privilege in one way, shape, or form. White people have white privilege because they don't have to worry about being pulled over by police and not having their hands in such a. As a man, I have a privilege of walking into a bar and not worrying about somebody slipping a Mickey in my drink. So I don't think people should feel guilty about their privilege either. So
I think it's how you define privilege, right? So I define privilege as power is part of my definition of privilege. It's privilege plus power. And collectively, foundational Black Americans do not have power. So we cannot have privilege.
Okay, so then it's never going to happen unless one group overpowers the other group. So we're all, so the end goal then is to have your own privilege, to have more privilege than white people, or to be even.
Oh, what was that?
I don't know. Nate got an email or something. Producer Nate, what the hell?
Where you at, Nate?
So one thing we all know to be true, right, is one person does not have power on his own. He or she has powers only in relation to other people, right? Mm-hmm. So if, in order for you to have power, I have to have less. In order for Mike to have power, I have to have less. And that's the problem with the system that we've set up here. In order for this system that we currently have to work, somebody, white Americans, have to have more power than collectively than foundational Black Americans. Otherwise, there is no power, right? Because again, power is nothing that one person can have. It's the collective. Mm-hmm. He or she has to have power in relation to other people, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what I would like to see is a world, as I mentioned before, where my grandsons can be as successful as they choose to be. Mm-hmm. And right now we have policies and practices on the books and off the books that prevent that from being so. And I want to see that change.
Okay. Well, if it's a per capita thing, that I think, there'll be a struggle because there are, honestly, I don't remember the last time. The percentage of Black Americans versus white Americans is, I think, what do you get, 14 or 20% or something like that. So I think that's, I feel like it's not the color of your skin that's making those policies, it's the people that you're voting for. So when are we all collectively, as white Americans that have empathy and Black Americans that have empathy, going to get rid of the people that are creating this for us in the first place?
So we can go back to the voting, because that kind of gets us right into that. It's a good segue back to what you were getting ready to say about voting.
Yep. So recently, I think it was just this week or late last week, legislation passed that made it not possible for people to vote on weekends, right? And the problem with that is lots of foundational Black Americans work in jobs that require them to be at work during the week.
Right. So
they can't get access to the polls if they can't vote on the weekends. That's by design. Right. I'm not saying that doesn't disenfranchise, poor middle class white folks either, but it largely disproportionately impacts poor foundational Black Americans. That's by design. That was not done by mistake.
Okay. So if we had one day, a national voting day, and every single person was required to get the day off of work so they could vote, would that fix it?
I hope so. It's a start.
Vote for Amy.
I mean, employers are supposed to
Vote for Amy Alexander. I love it. I'll be your running mate.
My running mate, yeah.
The White House would never be the same.
No shit. Oh my God. Oh, look out. Look out. So in that respect, because all that voting, you start with the Constitution and they've just been adding amendments and half of the stuff that we follow isn't even truly law if you look at the intent of the Constitution. But anyway, so do you think, and I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but have you ever thought about whether or not the Constitution should just be thrown out or if it can be adjusted?
I hadn't thought about that. I have very strong opinions about our political system. I think the entire system needs to be revamped, not just that piece of paper.
And we can end the show right there. Because that's true. I'm sorry, go ahead. Not just that piece of paper.
No.
Go ahead.
I just have very strong opinions that our political system, the way it's designed today, does not work.
Yeah.
We all agree on that.
That's something that we can all agree on.
Yeah, I have been very passionate against not necessarily the left or right, but against the government control that they have all over us. Because we'll never feel like your ancestors feel as slaves, but the new era of slavery is just right around the corner.
And that's for everybody.
Mm-hmm. That's for everybody. That's people versus proletariat.
Then we get into casting, the haves and the have-nots.
The other way around. The has and I mean, now you're talking Saul Alinsky and all those people that followed Saul Alinsky for the last 30 years. They're the ones that have the power now, and now we have to try to defeat them. So now we just became a conspiracy theorist. Oh shit! Again?
Yeah, that's where we went. That's just we're gonna get canceled. Oh no, that's the other one. Right?
Sorry, YouTube, Facebook, Google, and all you other asshats. I just because a lot of people want to think that the Constitution should just be scrapped, and I think that people are looking at it too literally and not looking at the intent of it. If we could go back and just say, all right, let's scrap everything except for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and make it in whatever pronouns we need to use to be all inclusive, whatever terminology we have to change from almost 300 years ago to make it seem more inclusive, because it really truly was supposed to be. Then I feel that I truly believe that we as a nation, as a community, and as a world leader, supposedly could really turn this around. But we've got so much stuff stacked on top over the decades of just cover-ups and crooked politicians trying, and using the people to get their way through manipulation, lying, and, all this other stuff. So I don't think that it should actually be taken away. I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble if we do that.
I think it would be difficult. I think it's difficult to create an inclusive anything unless you have diversity at the table at the onset, right?
Right.
So oftentimes people will say, oh, we really want to create this diverse program, this diverse offering. And I'm like, you can't do that if you don't have diversity at the table, right?
True.
So we could not have included an inclusive document without inclusive thought at the table. Mm-hmm. So for that reason alone, it might be important to revisit the Constitution.
Right. I'm not saying, there are a lot of people that are like Constitution word for word. Well, it's a legal document. It can be amended. Look at how many times the Federal Register or whatever is like 70,000 million trillion gazillion pages. That's a lot, by the way. But, I think if you could get people to understand that, not necessarily rewriting the intent of the Constitution, but putting it into more modern terms, and get rid of all this pork bellying and all this stuff that these politicians are getting from our dime,
right,
off our backs, black or white or whatever. Somehow
healthcare for the rest of their life after they do 4 terms.
Yeah.
2 terms or something like that.
Well, term limits would be the first thing I'd executive order right in.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. See, and I keep going back to the same thing I've said at almost every show. You know, we really need to get rid of the billionaires and the career politicians because they just don't care.
Right.
They do not care about the American people. And we need to get people in office.
They play a good game, and they have a lot of good handlers that make it seem like it.
Right.
But it's not working. And the reason that Mike and I came up, decided to do the show is because of our conversations, because we're always talking about the battle. The battle is always between the 15% on that side and the 15% on the other side. Mm-hmm. The extremists that can't keep their freaking mouth shut and see it any other way. And then there's 70%. We're thinking like 65 to 70% of us that just want to freaking get along. And if we could sit down in these communities, black and white and Asian or whoever, and hash this stuff out and find a way to get that power, that is the only way that we're going to end up making any changes.
Right.
But that's why people don't want to talk about critical race theory, right? Because I think it would bring us together. Right?
Do you? Yeah. So you think that there are more white Americans that don't want us to come together?
No, I didn't say more. I said that I think that's why some people are very uncomfortable with critical race theory, because what will happen is it'll create a different kind of relationship between people of different races, right? And then we can sit down and have conversations like this where we're like, we don't necessarily agree on every point, but I can empathize and see how you're being impacted by this particular piece of legislation. Because I know you now, and because I understand some of the challenges that you might be dealing with, my vote might lean in a different way. I might have a different perspective.
They don't want us to talk.
Yeah, God forbid we have a different perspective or different insight.
Well, we just need to get 70% of the country to watch the show.
Exactly. Put it out there.
Tune in, people.
Awesome.
Should we talk about should we wrap this up at this portion and talk about reparations?
We can. I was going to lead into reparations because we were talking about critical race theory, and one of the, it's just it's like this overall argument out there. And Mike and I are in agreement as far as reparations are concerned that there is a disproportionate financial instability between the black and the white community. But my thoughts are that we have already, through our government, given a lot of money to the inner cities and to the black community, and it hasn't changed. So I don't think just throwing more money at it is going to be the solution there. And
my thoughts on that was, we do need to put more money into that, but we need to pay reparations through education in the inner city. Allowing, teaching people how to work with finances, how to build a wealth for themselves and for their families and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So not actually giving someone a check, but also, being able to teach them how to earn it on their own. Right. And then even, to the point where once they pass the class with, whatever, they're able to, if they're a business person or whatever the case may be, they're able to take out a small business loan or something and open up a store in the ghetto or the inner city, and open up the store, buy a house or anything. No, I call it the ghetto because that's what I called it all my life. Right. That's why I grew up in Brooklyn. It was the ghetto. Yeah. Richmond, California was the ghetto, so that's what I've called it.
I didn't realize that was past like the G word or something.
What?
Ghetto. That I don't.
What do you mean?
Never mind. Anyway,
you have to let me know where you were going.
I got my head wrapped around this terminology and this cancel culture and how we can't say certain things to certain people. But if we can't say certain things to certain people, then how do you? like there's so much confusion in communication right now about what is supposed to be said and what's not supposed to be said, that it's making it worse than if we were just honest with each other and be like, I mean, yeah, there's certain things that you, like the N-word and things like that, you don't want to bring into society or bring back in, but all the canceling stuff. So that intrigued me that you corrected yourself on ghetto. So as far as reparations are concerned, Tracy, what are your thoughts about that? Like, where do you stand, and is that a part of critical race theory? Is that something, can critical race theory actually teach inner city kids to get ahead?
Well, I'm already stuck because I'm wondering what money you're talking about that has already been given to the Black community. What funds are you referencing?
I have a whole, but there is money going to schools in the inner cities, supposedly. So if that's not the case, correct me if I'm wrong. But like Biden here, new actions to build Black wealth and narrow the racial wealth gap, and this goes into it starts with the Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma Black Wall Street story, which I've and they're talking about discrimination on home appraisals. I get that, but so a lot of things, there's been the money dedicated to programs that are supposedly supposed to help Black kids or kids of color to advance, or at least to get equal in the eyes of themselves and society or whatever. But at the juncture we are right now, I don't feel like any of that money, even if it's a little bit of money, I don't think any of it's going in the right place. So if we just keep giving money to the people that are trying to keep us apart in the first place, and I don't really see it going in the right place either, still. But
yeah, I was also really taken aback by this idea that I think it's very elitist of us to assume that if the Black community were given reparations, we wouldn't know how to use it appropriately. Where is that narrative coming from?
No, that came from me, and it wasn't the fact that it wasn't the fact.
Yeah, I'm getting out of this conversation. That was not me, Tracy. That was not me.
No, it wasn't the fact. I wasn't saying that Black people in general. It was a blanket statement that if you give people that type of money who has never had it, more than likely they're going to end up back in the same situation because they haven't been taught how to invest that money, how to spend that money, how to make that money grow for them. So I don't know what that is, Nate.
Keep going, pal. You're good.
We could probably just talk about that for hours, but let's talk about reparations. Mm-hmm. So I do think that the United States owes the descendants of enslaved Africans reparations. Okay. I think about reparations as repair, and the damage that the United States did to enslaved Africans, took them out of their country, brought them here, and made them put them in a chattel slave system, which is not only did they own you, but their kids owned you, and they owned your kids. Like it's a chattel, like it was a never-ending cycle of slavery. Mm-hmm. Raped Black women and Black men. There was a lot of what we call buck breaking during enslaved times, where they would sodomize Black men and their sons to have power. Then they would take those children away. We've lost our language, we've lost our culture, and there was no repair from the United States of America, as if you could repair that with money, right? But if I hit you with my car today, Amy, and you got hurt, the insurance company is going to write you a check, and you possibly might sue me for damages, right? Why? Because we wanted to right that wrong through financial reparation, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we should be doing for descendants of enslaved Africans. We should absolutely repair, just like we do in other situations in this country, right?
Okay.
Financially, the lifelong traumas that the Black and Brown community continue to experience because of enslavement.
So how will we determine which people of color are the enslaved descendants of, or is it just like, okay, well, you're a brown or Black person, and so here's your check? I mean, how do we?
And then how do those reparations look? How does it look to so you're paying out these reparations? In what form, in your opinion? Okay, because that's all we got here is our opinions. In your opinion, what form or how should that look? Because I think it's education, and But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't think we get to decide that for folks. But right, I have a whole different. We could talk all day about education too, but that's a whole nother topic. I don't think we get to decide that for folks. I think we do give people monetary reparations. How we distribute those or how we determine who gets them, I have no idea. I think there are people way smarter than me that could come up with a solution or a formula or a strategy. Although, we did that for Native Americans, and then white Americans had the audacity to tell Native Americans if they were Native enough, right, to get those reparations, which again, another story.
I mean, you have to admit, with the melting pot that we are now, and the immigration if there are people coming in from Somalia, or I have no problem giving money to people that deserve it, and but if we're just going to blanket, that we'll be broke. We'll all be broke.
I think that there are people much smarter than me that could figure this out, but I think we need to. I think we need to figure it out, and I think we do need to pay reparations. I think we need to repair the damage that was done. And basically, enslaved Americans built this country. A lot of the ingenuity that we use right now was the ingenuity and creativity of enslaved Africans. And we never gave them a dime. We never rewarded them for their contributions to this country. So I think we need to do that. How we do it or who we give it to, I wish I knew. I don't know how that would work. But
do you have an idea of how much in your mind?
I think even if we get it wrong, we need to do it. I think we just
see that's
where
I have a problem.
Yeah, because I'm fiscally conservative. Otherwise, I'm pretty centrist or even left of a lot of issues. But
I think we spend a lot of money on lots of things. Like we were talking about the Federal Housing Authority. They spent, I believe, somewhere in the billions with a B to create redlining. Right. Mm-hmm. So we spend money on the things that matter to us. And I think we should figure that out. I wish I'm not savvy enough to figure out what that looks like or how much that would cost. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to make an attempt to right that wrong.
We did talk about that video in Chicago the other day.
Oh, yeah. We wanted to bring that up too.
Yeah. Did you see that, Tracy? The two black men it was two black men that beat up the two white men in the street of Chicago. Okay, so you saw that. So, as sad as that, shit like that happens. Whatever.
Tragic.
Do you think that there is ever going to be compromise on both sides? Do you see black communities saying, you know what, they're trying to do better for us? I think we'll do better for them. Do you see that happening, or do you feel like there's always going to be that animosity and pressure, or maybe not pressure, animosity towards white society so that we get that sort of response?
So I don't know that they attacked him because he was white. I think they attacked him because he was there. I live in Chicago, and we've had a lot of violence, particularly on that side of town, because that's where a lot of affluent folks live. So I don't know if they attacked him because he was white.
Right.
It was a tragedy, and it was shameful. And I don't condone bad behavior. I don't care who does it. It's unfortunate. I think what we saw there was what what I consider it's a psychological phenomenon called bystander syndrome, right? And so what we saw is psychologists have done studies on this. The more people that are there to witness an incident, the less likely they are to intervene. Psychologists have been studying this for years. So I think that what we saw there was there were a lot of people there. And typically when there are a lot of people, there's less desire to intervene. But it was inappropriate and it was wrong. And I don't know that it was motivated by race or racism.
Right. We don't know that.
They saw someone who was vulnerable and they took advantage of him.
Right.
And shame, that was shameful.
Yeah,
but I'm hopeful. I continue to have these conversations because I'm hopeful that we can find some common ground, right? And those of us who are willing to come to the table can have this authentic engagement and walk away as friends. And so that's why I do this work, because I'm really hopeful about the change that I think needs to happen.
Real quick, so you and I were talking the other day on the phone about that, and you were saying, well, let's rehash that conversation real quick. You were talking about the gentleman down there beating them up, and you were saying that well, it's sad that you feel, not you specifically, but maybe some white people feel that that's how all black people look at them.
Right. And I would, yes. I mean, through all this, and you and I've admitted this before, where I feel like I've become not racist with a negative attitude about people of color, but I've been more aware of, oh my gosh, I'm a white girl and they probably hate me because of all the evils that my ancestors did. And you get that kind of nervous feeling. And like I said, I'm like, you're never going to know that from my perspective, just the same as I'm never going to know from your perspective on how, but I think that's one of the things that they're doing to pull us apart and to make sure we stay scared.
Yeah. That video, I think, first off, I don't, like I told you on the phone, I don't know any black person that I know would look at that video and say, oh yeah, that was a great thing that happened.
There are people that cheered. I was like,
right.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah,
and
which is, I think, was the biggest part of it. Like, yeah,
right.
Guys get into tiffs and whatever, but the people standing around cheering and the traffic not helping and all that other stuff, I think is where people really got.
Yeah. And the sad part about that is that, as a black man, when I see videos like that, I get even more upset because now I feel like uncomfortable or around. I think that white people are looking at me as if I did that.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So that uncomfortable
I totally
feeling,
understand what you're saying.
Right? That uncomfortable feeling that you got.
That uncomfortable feeling, like I didn't do it, but
right.
why? But you're looking at it like I'm one of them, aren't I? You know, whatever. And that's really hard, and I think that's a side of both both cultures that we just need to, if white people can try to empathize more with the black people that, came in through the slavery era and have those ancestors, and then kind of in modern times, black people be like, okay, so I can get where you're kind of getting defensive because I know you didn't do it, but we're going to blame you anyway and make you pay because it was your ancestors.
And see, that's the thing I was talking about in the other podcast. I really don't, I don't know any black people that are pointing the finger in this day and age at white people saying, you did this. Excuse me. And you're continuing to do this today. Now, I realize that there are, what we're not doing is that we're not talking about it. We're not getting together. So people are staying over here and they're saying, okay, I'm not going to talk about race. It's just, it's like politics and religion now. You can't talk about race. You know what I mean?
Right.
There are things that you just can't talk about because everybody's uncomfortable with the conversation.
Do you think that's how we got to this point, is because we didn't talk about it for so many decades?
Yes. I think we were taught that the answer was to be colorblind. I don't see you. Right? And you can't get critical skills or analysis about people of a different culture unless you talk to them, understand them, engage with them, right? And I think what we're suffering from now is a lot of groupthink. Like you're hanging out with people who are just like you, who think exactly like you. And then every now and again, you get to talk to a mic, right? I'm hanging out with people who are just like me, who think exactly like me. And what we do is then we didn't perpetrate, we validate our feelings and concerns. Yep, white people hate us, right? Because we're all together having the same experience.
Right.
I will echo Mike's sentiment that I don't know any single Black person who, nobody in my circle, in my family, thought that behavior was okay. Nobody in my family or in my circle would have applauded in those instances. I mean, you can't account for stupid, right? You can't account for people who are unintelligent and hateful.
Yeah, those are the 30% we're counting.
Every group has those people. We're not the only group of people who have people who aren't kind, right? So I think again, we have to talk and have conversations and have this authentic engagement where you're saying I'm scared, and I'm saying I'm scared too.
Yeah. Now what the hell do we do? Yeah.
We don't let them take our guns away as well.
We don't. We definitely don't let them take our.
I think she just did a promo for the entire purpose of this podcast. Thank you. That was outstanding.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, well, and I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're wrapping up everything that we wanted to talk about, but I just want to reiterate that thank you so much, Tracy, for coming on this show and being willing to talk with us. And hopefully some people can listen to this and open their eyes a little bit and maybe just not be so pissed off and take it so personally. I'm not sure if that could ever happen, but if that doesn't happen and we can't get this together, then we're all done. I mean, in my opinion.
Then we're doing this for naught.
Yeah.
Because that's the reason why we're doing this show.
Like I said, I like to hang out with you, Mike, but
so that we can try to bridge that gap and bring the 70%ers together so that we can vote together, so that we can get on the same page. We don't have to think alike. We don't even have to love each other. We just need to have these conversations.
Have human respect.
And be able to respect one another. And at the end of the day, some things we just agree to disagree on. And that's okay. And that's okay.
As long as we all understand that it's going to be very difficult for everybody to get their way fully until we actually come together and compromise to get the jack-offs out of office that are creating these problems in the first place.
You got a lot of names for those guys.
Oh, Dickwad, Jack. Let's see. I have a lot of names.
Asshat's my favorite.
Asshat, Asshat's my favorite too. I think.
All right.
Yeah.
I need a bumper sticker that says that get the jackasses out of jackwads.
Jackwad? Yeah, Jackwad.
Out of office. I love it.
Get the jackwads out of office. Yeah.
Hey, Tracy, before you go, sorry to interrupt, but your work and your resume is impressive. And if you could, before you go, it doesn't necessarily have to be this moment, but tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that you have faced throughout, especially with the E word now that has spread throughout equity. Second anyone hears equity, for some reason it's polarizing throughout our country. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Can I speak to the challenges I've had? I haven't had any
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, people who contract with me, who want to work with me, are people who care passionately about these issues. So they're coming because they want to do better. They want to know more. They want to change policy, right? Whether that's corporate policy or political policy. So those are the people who are coming to see me. So I haven't seen any issues with that. I think personally, and this is not gonna, I apologize in advance because you guys are gonna get some phone calls about this. I think personally, some of the issues that I'm having around equity is that we're really starting to tie sexuality with racism. And I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with that.
I guess I'm not sure.
We're going to have her back on for that show.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that one.
Yeah, because I think all three of us could sit here for a few hours and talk, but we don't want to, the audience isn't, they're just going to have to deal with it.
Well, I mean, that's a conversation for another show. It really is. So,
but I don't want to leave it there, but I can just say that I don't believe that, although I do believe that people are harmed, misused, being attacked because of how they identify sexually, or how they identify as a person. I don't think that those issues are the same as the issues that foundational Black Americans are having. And I feel like the plight of foundational Black Americans is being overshadowed by the struggles of the LGBTQ plus community.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not going to make me popular, but I'm saying it.
Yeah. Well, when we do have that show, I definitely want to bring you back on for that, because I have a statement about that, about my daughter in school and the bathroom and all of that stuff. We'll leave that for another time. Yeah. You have anything that you want to add before we close out here, Tracey?
I would just suggest that you continue to have this dialogue. I know it's uncomfortable. I think a lot of us don't have this conversation, particularly to Amy's point, because we don't have the jargon, right? We're not academics. Just talk from an authentic place. There are tons of resources out there. If anybody's interested in those resources, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Great books you can read, podcasts very similar to yours, that just give you an opportunity to have dialogue. And what we tell people is, once you read a book or once you listen to this podcast, don't do that in a silo, right? Then go sit down with someone and say, hey, let me tell you what I read today or heard today. And let's talk a little bit about how I experienced that conversation or how I experienced that literature. But you don't have to be perfect to talk. You don't have to be perfect to have the dialogue. Just talk about it. Tell your authentic truth. Talk from an authentic space. A dialogue is the answer.
It is
to the questions
to our
that
unity.
we have about how we get together, right?
Yes.
Agreed.
For sure.
Agreed.
For sure. Well, Tracey, thanks so much. We appreciate
Absolutely.
your insights, and we'll make sure you give producer Nate all of your information so he can put it in down below, right under where you hit subscribe. And we hope to talk with you again. And thank you, everybody, for joining the 70%. I'm Amy Alexander.
And I'm Mike Sewell.
And we'll see you next time.
No doubt.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.